YouTube? Welcome back. This is episode 3, part 4. I didn't think I'd have to break this up into 4 parts, but in the interest of not posting an hour-long video, here we are. Preface this again by saying I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm just a guy who's gone through some experiences on his own, and I'm trying to share my story in the hopes that it'll help somebody. So last episode we ended with me getting on a plane to go back to headquarters to leave my detachment behind, or leaving my detachment behind, which again was not an easy decision to make. So again, that was hard, and I knew the team was going to be okay. I knew like they were a highly capable team. They did not need me, but it was still a hard decision. When you work with a small group of people that are similarly motivated for such a long time, you develop a relationship where, even as an officer, you try to maintain that standoff where you're not their friend. Admittedly, that is something that me personally, I struggle with, right? Like me as Nate Quinn, Captain Quinn, I had a hard time trying to not get too close and become one of the guys, because I'm not. That's not my role. I understood that my role required me to keep a degree of separation, but that was fucking challenging for me. But yeah, so that's why that was hard. I love that easily. That was an awesome team to be a part of, and it was a privilege to work with them. Guys, I love it. Y'all know who you are. And they did fine. They finished out the rest of the trip just fine without me. So I got back to higher headquarters, and I got to talk to a psychiatrist. He was an Air Force officer. He was a lieutenant colonel. He was an 05. But it's important because this was the first real medical provider that I had spoken with, right? That outside of that phone call to Barry, it's the first guy I actually talked to face about what was going on. So I laid everything out to this dude, right? Like start to finish, like the discovery of the moral injury, what the moral injury was, and then how everything cascaded from there. I think I was in that dude's office for like 2 or 3 hours, all the way up until like, okay, here we are today, right? And so he was the first person I laid everything out to, and I was just like, I felt very relieved to like, okay, here's somebody who knows the whole story, everything. Right, like, all right, now, and I wanted to see, like, all right, am I crazy? Am I suicidal? What is, like, this guy's a professional, you tell me, right? Because here I am freaking out about all this stuff. And he, to my surprise and his relief, or my relief, his response was extremely similar, if not more clinically founded. So he reinforced why he felt the way he did, based off his medical background and his medical experience to my wife's, right? Very, like, not that big a deal, right? And it's not to say he minimized it or made light of it. He's like, I know it feels like a big deal to you, and that it is a big deal to you, but on the scale of the way he tried to explain it to me was like on the scale of like severe things that I've seen to like, normal folk who, that's not a good word, folks that aren't dealing with those cognitive injuries, he's like, you're not even close to like some of the more extreme stuff. It's like, he was saying that to assuage me that, like, I felt like I was in crisis mode, but he's like, hey man, your case is not that bad. Understanding that you don't feel that way because I have no basis for comparison, right? But that helped me a little bit, and he was like, "Hey man, your moral injury is not it's not as big a deal as you made it out to be." One of the bigger things he told me was like, "Hey man, you're not suicidal. Like, you're not. You've had intrusive thoughts, you've had morbid thoughts, but you're not suicidal." And I was like, "Oh, thank God!" Right? Like that was a huge relief because I'm like, I don't know what this is. It was very relieving to hear these things from a medical professional. And again, to like have everything aired out, like, all right, it's all out there in the open. This dude, if he's going to put me in a straitjacket and put me in bouncy walls for the rest of my life, like, at least I'll be alive, right? that, like, as silly as that might seem, like, that's where my concern was. And he was awesome. He was like, yeah, dude, not that big of a deal. Like, you're fine, dude. And he was telling me that, he's like, you must have felt so alone, for such a long time. And I was like, yeah. And that, reflecting on that months later during my, my treatment helped me realize, like, being alone with this stuff is so much harder. And I didn't need to be, right? Like, nobody made me alone. I chose to be alone and not involve other people and not tell the people that I trusted or that I cared about what was going on. And, as we'll cover it in this, not just this story, but when we get into, the cognitive first aid kit and some of the techniques that I used, the more people that I told, the easier it got. And it's weird, right? And even, folks that I still, even after I started posting these videos, people are hitting me up like, hey man, feeling some kind of way, or yeah, me too. I've had some pretty extreme events occur after posting these videos, where it went high orbit pretty fast. When I asked that person, like, hey, do you feel better now that you told somebody? Not just you told two people, multiple people? And it's like, yeah, it was easier to tell the second person, like, right? But we do it to ourselves. Like, us as dudes, we do it to ourselves. And so saying that to say, you don't have to do this alone. And it is so much easier not to do it alone and to get other people involved and to establish these support networks and these safety nets. And unbeknownst to me, that's what I was doing by telling all these people, right? I was establishing these support networks and these safety nets, which provide a degree of, like, psychological ease, right? Kind of reduce some of the tension and the anxiety. But this was an important event because this is really the beginning of my recovery, right? This is when I was, all right, I'm starting on the road. And I told him, like, hey, doc, whatever, I'm committed to doing whatever you as the medical professional deem necessary. Do we need to do meds? Let's do meds. We need to do therapy. Like, let's, typical Green Beret fashion. Like, there's a problem. We've identified the problem. Let's find the solution, right? Let's fix it. I'm committed to fixing this. Let's do it. Which is good and bad, right? And I'll get into that more as we dive into the issues, or the treatment, the cognitive first aid kit, and the techniques that I tried. But while this was the beginning of my my journey, and I felt a sense of relief, my cognitive immune system was already compromised, right? So it was already fractured, and my brain was in chaos. So he agreed, like, hey, let's get you home. That, we could try to treat you here, but home is going to be a better spot to treat you. And the return on investment of keeping you here and trying to treat you at the same time, it's not really there. You're not a threat to yourself or others. Like, we'll get you home on a plane. So I was on a civilian airliner back to my home the next couple of days. But while in the process of going home, I had a lot to think about. And again, I didn't really know what I was dealing with, right? And I'm a Green Beret, and I shoot competitively. Up to that point, I had done a lot of competitive shooting. It was something that I started doing to help develop my professional skills, and then that kind of turned into me just doing it because I enjoyed it, because I wanted to compete, and it was fun for me. So the decision to move my guns out of the house was a very hard one for me to make, because access to firearms was part of me, right, as a Green Beret, right? Like, hey, my job is to train other people how to fight with guns and then go fight alongside them with guns. And one of my hobbies is to shoot competitively. And now I'm making the choice to get the guns out of my house because I don't know what's going on. But that was a tough decision to make, but I was committed to like, I'm fixing this and I do not know what I'm dealing with. So just let's err on the side of caution. Let's get the guns out of the house so I'm not a threat to myself or anybody else. Sent them, and my mom was awesome. She drove all the way up from Florida to Fort Bragg, grabbed my guns and took them back down. And my wife was like, "Oh yeah, I had already called your mom. Like we were already doing that." And I was like, "Oh, well, we're on the same page then. Great." So that was awesome. And they held on to my guns, and my wife also took extras. Like she hid the medicine, she hid the knives. Like I remember one day going to cut something, and I was like, "Where the fuck are all the like the kitchen knives?" Oh, okay. That makes sense. So I got home, and again, just to reinforce, like, all right, something is off, right? My previous two deployments, and this is kind of a check I did with myself, right? My previous two deployments, I was so happy to see my wife, right? Like I could not wait to get, like, that airplane door could not open fast enough. I just wanted to hold her, kiss her, hug her. And then when I came home from this trip, I didn't feel anything. It's not to say I felt bad. I just didn't feel anything. It was just pure apathy, right? I saw her there. She's pregnant with our baby. And I'm just like, beep. And I was just like, sorry. Yeah, something's definitely off here, because that's not the typical reaction, right? Like typically my experience was I'm super excited, so happy to see her. And I was just kind of like, hey, like very flat affect, right? And so that just reinforced like, hey, yep, this is legitimate. Like something's going on. So I started getting treatment. Same guy I talked to on the phone when I was deployed, Barry. He was my therapist. I started meeting with him about a couple hours, first couple weeks. Also started taking some medication. The medication they prescribed, I can't remember the name of it, but it was important to know, it was not a frontline antidepressant, right? It was supposed to help sleep, and that was one of the things they figured was like, hey man, your sleep sucks, and so lack of sleep severely inhibits your cognitive immune system, right? My words, I'm paraphrasing here, using the cognitive injuries as the verbiage, but they're like, hey man, when you are sleep deprived, your brain's not thinking appropriately. So let's get you some more sleep. Like, okay, that makes sense. So they prescribed me this medication that was supposed to help me sleep, and it also had some antidepressive properties, but it wasn't primarily an antidepressant. But it still had a really great effect at first, right? I didn't notice it while I was initially depressed, but as soon as I took the medication, I realized that it almost was like a gray filter over my vision, and it was like somebody just cranked up the light, like the brightness setting, and it was like all of a sudden like lights were really bright. It was like for whatever reason I kept looking down, or I was never really looking up, like my vision was always downcast. And then like I was like, somebody just increased my field of vision and cranked up the brightness setting, and it was wild because that was a physiological change that I was able to observe, not just like, oh, I feel better, like, okay, yeah, sure, but I was like, holy shit, dude, like, what the fuck, right? Like, my wife and I would go for walks a lot outside because going out in nature helps getting out of the house. I was just like, dude, like, colors, brightness, holy crap. So a very noticeable, almost immediate shift. The problem became that because it wasn't a frontline antidepressant medication, the effects kind of wore off after about 2 weeks. And when I talked to the provider, he was like, "Oh yeah, sometimes they wear off 2 weeks." And that it was at that point I began to realize, like, all right, there is a lack of a sense of urgency with these providers, and part of that was because of how I presented. Right, it was, for lack of a better term, it was a facade, right? Like, hey, my job is, as a Green Beret, is to maintain control of my outward appearance. Present calm, cool, and collected, articulate, not freaking out, right? Even though internally I was losing my shit. And so I was like, I remember talking to Barry one day, I was like, look, man, I don't think you guys realize, like, I know I'm talking to you clearly, and I'm not losing my mind right now in your office, but like when I leave this office and I go home, I am terrified. I'm losing my shit. Like the only reason I don't appear that way right now is because I have control of myself. But like I don't know how long that's gonna last. Like I have like that's a fixed asset, right? And I am using it. And at a certain point, I will run out. I don't know when that is. Let's not find out. So it would be beneficial, I think, if you guys would maybe expedite this or like get a little bit more sense of urgency. And he was like, yeah, makes sense to me. So they changed the medication. I increased the amount of therapy I was getting. And the way I phrased it when we were doing the therapy was like, I feel like I'm losing a fight right now. Like I'm in a fight for my life and I'm losing. And like, you guys don't understand that I'm losing. Like I'm losing ground. But when I laid it out like that, they're like, okay, yeah, cool. So it is important. And this is something my wife really articulated to me, is that you as the patient, right, you need to advocate for yourself, right? The providers, not in a malicious way, but they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what you're feeling. They don't know what you're going through internally, right? They only know what you tell them and what they see. So if they see that you're fine and you don't tell them you're freaking out, what do they have to go off of? So you have to self-advocate. No one is going to do it for you. Fortunately, my wife was in like mama bear mode and she was like super aggressive, right? She's like, I'll advocate for you. I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care if they don't like, it's the army. Like, I'm a civilian. What are they going to do to me? And I'm like, God, I love you. So she was like, hey, go, if you're feeling some kind of way, go get help, go say something. And so, Barry and I would meet a lot, and Barry was a therapist. He was not a psychiatrist or psychologist. But was eventually diagnosed with major depressive disorder of unspecified severity, and we increased my therapy, but I did both, right? I did both therapy and medication because I was committed. I was like, whatever we need to do, I will do. Let's fix this. And so eventually, over months, we started to taper off my therapy. It went from doing 3 times a week to 2 times a week, and then ultimately 1 time a week. And Barry and I would dig into my past and, try to unpack stuff as we went. And, I think principally one of the biggest things he helped me realize was, 2 things really that I want to highlight. Good people can make bad decisions. Good people can make mistakes. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. And then secondly, not to judge ourselves off of things we've done in the past, right? So 30-something-year-old Nate was judging 13-year-old Nate. I was holding 13-year-old me to the same standards that I currently held 30-year-old me. That's not fair. And it's not really healthy because I can't change what I did in the past. Any of us can't. And so it is not fair for us to use current metrics to judge things of the past. And it is only going to hurt because you can't change it. There's nothing you can do about it. And so that was exceedingly helpful. But yeah, so did that, kept going through the remainder of my time on active duty. But by the time I left, Barry felt like, hey, you're no longer depressed, right? The clinical definition was that it was impacting your day-to-day activities, and he was like, I don't think it is anymore. You periodically enter depressed states, and it comes and goes, right, at the time, but it is not a constant anymore. So I think you don't have clinical depression anymore. And I was like, great, cool. Now, fast forward to today, I still periodically dip into depressive episodes. It just happens. I still do therapy through the VA. I kept doing therapy when I left active duty through the VA. Still take my medication. And again, I learned that the bulk of what I was dealing with was intrusive thoughts. and fast forward, left active duty summer 22. So 3 years later, still here. And yeah, I mean, my biggest hope is that illuminating and sharing this story and in my experience will help other people do the same thing and help change the narrative. Like, hey, there's a positive story. We didn't lose him. Still here. But I will end with one thing. So, a parting thought. Everything I've done in my life professionally, right? Ranger school, Special Forces qualification course, jumping out of airplanes from 1,000 feet to 13,000 feet when I did not pass, but I did go to military free fall. So I jumped out of airplanes at, 12,500 feet. I'm not a sky ninja. I'm sorry. All those things that I've done, I would rather do it all over again than dealing with depression, right? Or at least I felt that way at the time, right? When I was in the depths of my treatment, that was the single hardest thing I had ever done. Ranger school, the Q course, all of it paled in comparison to dealing and fighting with depression. I would do that entire pipeline. I would do that all over again, given a choice. Like, hey, would you want to go through depression again, or would you want to go through Ranger school and the Q course all over again? Easy, Ranger school Q course, all day long. And as much as I might wish for that, that's not an option. And so the only path is to keep moving forward. And so I'm saying that to say, if you are going through this, you're not alone, and it is fucking hard. And if you know somebody that's going through this, it's fucking hard. I'm not sorry about swearing for that one, because I want to reinforce the severity of the challenge. It is hard. It sucks. It sucks less if you do it with somebody. So talk to somebody. Leave a comment in the comment section on the video down there. All right. Tell somebody. It gets easier. I promise you. All right. I've done it. You can do it too. So, all right, we did it in 4 episodes, way over time, but we'll move on to episode 4 next week. In the meantime, watch the video there. I'm sorry, it's over there. Yeah, watch the video there, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week. Until that time, see you.